I read that email 3 times before I understood what I was looking at. My mother had sent it at 11:47 on a Tuesday night. The subject line said moving forward. The body said 7 sentences. The last one was, "We've decided we no longer need your involvement in our finances or our lives. Please do not contact us." I sat at my kitchen table in Austin with my phone in my hand and the screen going dark, and I thought, did she send this to the right person? I checked the address. It was mine. I checked the name at the top. It was mine. I set the phone face down on the table, and I made myself a cup of tea. Not because I was calm. Because I needed something to do with my hands, while my brain caught up with what had just happened. What time is it where you're watching this right now? Because I want you to picture that moment. 11:52 at night. Kitchen lit by one overhead light. Tea I couldn't taste. And 7 sentences that erased 32 years. Let me back up. Because the email was not the beginning. It never is it? My name is not important. What is important is that I am 31 years old. I work in financial planning, and for the past 4 years, I had been the person my family called when something went wrong. Not just called, relied on. Structurally. The way a building relies on a specific beam without ever acknowledging that the beam exists. My parents live in Scottsdale. My father is retired. My mother manages a small rental property they bought in 2019, 1 unit, 1 tenant. More paperwork than they expected. I set up their bookkeeping system. I did their taxes 2 years in a row. When the tenant disputed a repair charge in 2022, I was the one who drafted the response letter and walked my mother through the process. I did not do these things because anyone asked me to each time. I did them because it was understood. Because I was the one with the skills. Because in my family, having skills means having obligations. My younger brother Derek is 38. I know what you're thinking. How is the younger sibling older? He's not my biological brother. My parents took him in when he was 19, a family friend's son who had nowhere to go. They never formally adopted him. But he became part of the household, and when my parents introduced him to people, they called him their son. And I called him my brother, because that felt like the right thing to do. Derek is charming. That is the first thing anyone says about him. He is warm and funny, and he remembers your coffee order, and he asks follow-up questions in conversations. The way that makes people feel like the most important person in the room. I liked him. Genuinely. For a long time, I thought we were close. The rental property income went directly into a joint account my parents shared with Derek. This had been set up, my mother told me, so that Derek could help manage day-to-day expenses while my father's health was being monitored after a minor cardiac episode in 2023. She said it was temporary. She said it was just practical. I did not set up that account. I was not asked. I found out about it in passing, 6 months after the fact, when my mother mentioned it casually over the phone like it was something I already knew. I remember thinking that it was a little unusual. I remember deciding not to say anything, because I didn't want to seem territorial. I was not trying to control my parents' money. I just wanted them to be okay. Here's what I did not know at the time. Derek had been telling my parents, for at least a year, that I did. I found this out from my cousin Diane, who lives in Phoenix, and who has always been the kind of person who tells you difficult things gently but completely. She called me on a Wednesday afternoon, 2 weeks before the email, and she said she needed to tell me something she'd heard at a family dinner the weekend before. She said Derek had spent the better part of an evening explaining to my aunts and uncles that I had been putting pressure on my parents about their finances, that I had opinions about how they spent their money, that I had once told my father he was wasting his retirement savings on things that didn't matter, that I was, in Derek's words, trying to position myself as the one in charge. None of that happened. Not a word of it. I asked Diane if anyone had questioned him. She paused for a moment and then said, "They mostly just listened. He tells a very convincing story." That sentence landed somewhere cold in my chest and stayed there. I did not call my parents that night. I thought about what I wanted to say and how I wanted to say it, and I realized I didn't have enough information yet. I didn't know how long this had been going on. I didn't know what exactly they believed. And I had learned, through 31 years of being the responsible one in this family, that walking into a conversation underprepared helps no one. So I waited. I watched. I started paying attention to things I had previously filtered out. 2 weeks later, my mother sent the email. 7 sentences. No phone call first. No conversation. No can we talk. Just a decision, delivered in writing, at 11:47 at night. I did not respond that evening. I finished my tea. I went to bed. I know that sounds impossible, but I want to be honest with you. I did not cry. I did not spiral. I did not text anyone. I lay in the dark, and I thought very clearly about what was actually happening and what I was going to do about it. Because here's the thing about being the financial person in a family. You know exactly where everything is. I am not going to tell you I had a plan before I fell asleep. I didn't. But I knew 2 things. First, that responding emotionally would give Derek exactly the kind of ammunition he needed. Second, that there were financial structures in place, structures I had helped build that had my name on them in specific ways, and that those structures gave me options that my parents may not have fully thought through when they sent that email. I had been listed as a co-trustee on a revocable living trust my parents established in 2021. I had helped them set it up. It contained their primary residence and a brokerage account. Being a co-trustee is not the same as being a beneficiary. It is an administrative role, but it is a role, and roles have processes. I called an estate attorney the next morning. Not to be aggressive, not to threaten anyone. I called because I needed to understand my own position before I made any moves. The attorney confirmed what I already knew. I could formally request to step down from the trustee role, which would require documentation and notification. I could also, if I believed there was financial mismanagement occurring, request an accounting. I did not do any of that yet. I first sent my mother one reply to her email. It said, "Received. I'll need to formally step back from any shared financial arrangements. I'll be in touch through appropriate channels." That was it. Nothing else. I want to ask you something right now, and I want you to really think about it before you keep watching. Have you ever been in a situation where someone who was supposed to know you looked straight through all the evidence of who you actually are and chose to believe a different version instead? Not because the evidence wasn't there, but because the other version was easier, or more convenient, or being delivered by someone more charming? Because that is what was happening in my family. And the part that hurt most was not the email. The part that hurt most was understanding that it had been building for a year, and no one had called me. Not my mother. Not my father. Not one aunt or uncle who had sat and listened to Derek rewrite my character over dinner. No one had picked up the phone and said, "Hey, we're hearing some things. What's going on?" Silence. Until the email. My phone buzzed at 9:15 the next morning. My mother. I let it ring. 9:47 my father. I let it ring. 10:22 my mother again. I let it ring. I was in a meeting, and then I was on a call, and then I was eating lunch at my desk. And I let it ring because I was not ready, and because I had learned slowly, over years, that responding to pressure from this family, before I was ready, always resulted in me apologizing for things I had not done. By 6 p.m., there had been 23 missed calls between my 2 parents. My brother had not called. I noticed that. At 6:30, I received a text from my father. It said, "Please pick up. Your mother is very upset. We may have been given incorrect information about some things. Please call." May have been given incorrect information. I read that sentence 4 times. I want you to notice what it does not say. It does not say we were wrong. It does not say we're sorry. It does not say Derek's name. It says may have been. It says some things. It keeps every door open and no one accountable. I texted back. "I'm glad you're looking into it. I'm not in a place to talk tonight. I'll reach out when I'm ready." The calls continued. By the following morning there were 46 missed calls total across both parents. My father had also emailed a long email, more than the 7 sentences my mother had managed, which I thought was at least something. He said they had had a conversation with Derek about some of the things he had told them. He said Derek had become defensive. He said some of what Derek told them may not have been fully accurate. May not have been fully accurate. There it was again. That careful, Non-committal language. The language of people who know they've done something wrong, but haven't yet decided how wrong they're willing to admit it was. Here is what I did while the calls were coming in. I pulled together every financial document I had ever helped my parents with. Tax returns, trust documents, correspondence about the rental property, emails I had sent with advice and context. 2 years of clean, organized records, everything time-stamped, everything in my own handwriting or my own email address. The record of someone who had been helping, not controlling. I also requested, informally, a bank statement summary from the institution that held the joint account, the one with Derek's name on it. I was not a party to that account. But I knew the bank, and I knew what to ask for in terms of what a trustee of a connected estate account might be entitled to see. The attorney helped me understand the boundaries. What I found I am not going to detail completely, because there are aspects of this that are still being reviewed by people more qualified than me. What I will tell you is that the transaction history of that account, over 18 months, showed a pattern of transfers to a secondary account that did not belong to my parents. Regular amounts, predictable intervals, nothing individually large enough to trigger automatic alerts, but consistent. Derek had not been helping my parents manage their day-to-day expenses. He had been managing a very slow, very careful movement of money that my parents had not noticed and had not been told about. I called my father that evening. Not because I was ready for the emotional conversation, because I had information that he needed to have, and delivering it was more important than my feelings about the 46 missed calls. I was calm on the phone. I want to be clear about that. I did not say I told you so. I did not bring up the email. I did not talk about Derek's campaign against me, or the family dinners, or Diane's phone call. I told my father that in the process of stepping back from the financial arrangements, I had come across some information that concerned me, and I asked if they had recently reviewed the joint account statements carefully. There was a long silence on the phone. My father said, "What do you mean by carefully?" I told him what I had found, as specifically as I could without overstepping. I told him the name of the attorney I had spoken with. I told him I thought they should call their bank the next morning, and I told him exactly what to ask for. He was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "How long have you known about this?" I said, 2 days. Another silence. Then, "Why didn't you lead with this?" And I want to tell you I took a breath before I answered that. Because the answer was complicated, and the simple version was going to have to be enough for that phone call, I said. Because I needed to be sure. And because I needed to take care of my own situation first, so I could come to you clearly. He said, "I'm sorry about the email." 3 words after 46 phone calls. After weeks of Derek's version of me spreading through the family like a slow leak, I said, "I know." Because I did know. And because accepting an incomplete apology gracefully is one of the most exhausting skills I have ever had to develop. Derek no longer has access to that account. I am not going to tell you the details of how that was handled, because there are legal considerations still in motion. What I will tell you is that it was handled by my parents, by the attorney, by the bank, and that I was not the one who had to be loud about it. The paperwork was loud enough. I remained on the trust. My parents asked me to stay. I said I would, with the condition that we establish clearer communication going forward, specifically that if someone in the family ever raised concerns about me or my behavior, I would hear about it before decisions were made. They agreed. Diane called me when she heard what had happened. She said, "I should have called you sooner." I told her that the call she made when she did was still the right one, because it was. It gave me 2 weeks to understand the landscape before the email arrived. 2 weeks I used. Here is the thing I want you to take with you from this. Wherever you're watching from, whatever time it is, the most dangerous version of being underestimated is when the people doing it love you, because you never see it as a threat. You see it as a misunderstanding that will resolve itself. You think they know you well enough that someone's story about you can only go so far. You trust the history. But history doesn't protect you. Documentation does. Clarity does. Understanding your own position before a crisis, not after, does. I did not win anything here. My brother, the person I called my brother, had been lying to my parents for over a year and moving their money while he did it. My parents believed him long enough to send an email that said they no longer needed me in their lives. The trust I thought we had was not as solid as I thought it was. None of that is a win. It is a reckoning. And reckonings are not satisfying the way people on the outside sometimes imagine they are. What I have now is clarity. I know exactly where I stand. I know what I was willing to do when it mattered. I know that when I was handed the worst email I have ever received, I made myself a cup of tea, I went to sleep, and I handled it in the morning. And I know that when my father asked why I didn't lead with the account information, why I took care of myself first, I had an answer that was true. Because you cannot help people clearly when you're standing in the middle of the fire. You have to step back first. You have to know your own ground. And then you walk back in, and you do what needs to be done, not because anyone thanked you, but because it was the right thing, and you were the one who could. That's it. That's the whole story. If any part of this felt familiar, if you've ever been the person with the skills and the quiet obligations and the assumption that people who know you will always know you, I hope this was useful to you tonight. Take care of yourselves. And if someone in your life is handling your finances, please check your statements.